Welcome back, scholars. We have a treat today to hear from our really good friend, Asena Taione-Filihia. I'm just going to quickly introduce her and then have Kehao say a few words, and then we'll jump right into Asena's presentation. I'll be doing the formal biography, but I just wanted to thank Asena for joining us today. We had the honor of having you and your mom last year, and it was one of the highlights for many of our scholars. Just hearing both of your words and to talk about Ngatu in a way that many times we've been talking about perspective with our scholars, that we usually don't have that perspective when you're using these objects every day or within cultural context, but not really knowing what it means. So what a privilege it is for you to come. And I know you're so busy and you have so many familial obligations. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And to, you'll probably talk some about this, but really feel your mother and hope that you will continue this work that you all started together. And it means a lot to us. So without further ado, I want to introduce Asena. Asena Taione-Filihia is Tongan Pacific Islander and a mother of three and partner to Filihia. She's the daughter of Taione Dukolovatu and Makeleta Filimoehala Taione, born and raised in Southern California, but has ties to the villages of the villages in Tonga, Tuanuku, Utui, Veitongo, Whangaleaunga, and Nuku'alofa. She currently serves as the Assistant Director of the Asian American Resource Center at Pomona College within the Claremont College Consortium. She works closely with students to develop strong personal, local, and regional awareness in regards to the APIDA experiences and their ability of influence and shape the future of APIDA communities at the college and beyond. She works closely with the local Tongan nonprofit, Malo, motivating action leadership opportunities to host the Saturday Tongan Education Program, which offers educational support for local Tongan families in the Inland Empire. She's currently part of the Pacific Islanders COVID Task Force, board member of the Native Pacific Islanders Summer Intensive Transfer Experience at UCLA, and also serves on multiple Pacific Islander underserved community-oriented initiatives and committees. So we thank you, Asena, for sharing your time and this presentation with us. And I'll give the time over to Cal.
Thank you, Moana, for the formal introduction. If I could add some just words of how I got to know Asena. Asena and actually was walking the halls of UCLA. She was graduating from Cal State Northridge. She was with her friend, and they both went to campus and they were trying to find resources. And I think someone had directed Asena to my office. And I know I had shared with many of you yesterday that I was the first Pacific Islander to graduate from the MA program in Asian American Studies. And we were trying to develop more initiatives and programs around Pacific Islander studies. So I met Asena there for the first time, but the rest is kind of history in terms of how what Moana was sharing yesterday was how we're being led. And Asena had this passion for education. She had a passion for trying to get more Pacific Islanders into higher education. And we kept in touch despite me leaving UCLA to pursue my job, my doctoral degree at UCR, and then my job at the Claremont colleges. And I don't know if you all remembered yesterday when I shared about being at the Claremont colleges, but I had this opening and basically I was like, well, we work with the STEP program, the Saturday Tongan Education Program. We need to hire a Tongan at the Claremont colleges. And the person that I thought of immediately was Asena and her passion for community work and her passion for education. And on a personal note, Asena and I, she's like one of my best friends. She has been there in many situations where my family could not. At many celebrations for my advanced degrees, her and her family has showed up to be there with me as my chosen family. And she has taught me more about not only being Hawaiian, but how to be a Pacific Islander woman in the diaspora. Her and her mom are a force out in Southern California. And I know her mom is with us today, as she was last year, sharing her knowledge and her love for our community to inspire others. So from the bottom of my heart, Asena, I know that your Makaleta Mama Bear is here with us, and I just want to thank you for actually agreeing to doing this session, because Mom was with us last year. So I know that this will bring up emotions, but I also think that Mom, if you know anything about Asena's mom, she would want us to continue the work that we're doing. And she's very much that person in many of the programs that we used to do in Southern California and beyond. So we're in for a treat this afternoon, and I'm just in immense appreciation and love that I get to see my sister virtually on the screen continue to share her knowledge, her passion around education and culture. So thank you, sis. Love you.
Oh my goodness, I'm already, eyes are sweating already. Well, let me first start with just gratitude and thank you so very much, Moana, for that opening and inviting me in, and Dr. Kealanivan for giving me this opportunity to not only connect our relations, but to be able to, build, continue building bridges into the future. I, like you all said, I come from a mother who's very deeply believed in what the future could hold if we sat and nurtured it. And so to that end, I am so grateful to sit in the shade of what you all have created, the Pasifika Scholar Summer Institute, and being able to offer this workshop today. So thank you so much. You all know I deeply appreciate and respect both of you. And not just women that are Pacific Islander women, but women that are truly holding the lands, together at this point. So thank you for not only Pu'upu'u Whenua, but really holding the relationships that make our world or make these spaces possible. So thank you both. And then also thank you, Kale and Mana, for making sure that everything, all the labor and creating these spaces. I know there's so much that goes into actually hosting this week. So just want to acknowledge you all for your labor. I'm going to go ahead and start with the title of this workshop. I actually went back and forth with my mom on this title. And as both Kehal and Wana have shared, my mom is now in the spirit world, as they say. She is resting. She has done a lot of work, and she deserves the rest that she has, that she's in right now. So, ironically, before she told me that this is an appropriate title, because she said it's if we're talking about Ngatu, she said there's a lot that can happen with talking about Ngatu, but she thought that it was important that the healing of relationships comes from the women. And she said every relationship you can always find a woman, because every brother has a sister, every son has a mother, every nephew has an aunt, and so it was her belief that there's always going to be a woman that can give healing or give love and make sure that those responsibilities are held rightfully so. And so she came back to me, and it was Whakamo'oikihe Whewhine I Whenua. So healing to the women of the land. She said, no, it's healing from the women of the land. So that's how we ended up changing this workshop title. So I want to acknowledge her, and this workshop being much of her knowledge base I learned from her. And so I left her name here. We did this last year. This is the last time I did this workshop. So I'm really excited just to be back here with you all in the spirit of what she's given and what she shared as her knowledge. And so this workshop is dedicated to her. So go ahead and continue from there. Let me get this slide going. Also, this should be at least a frame to think of this workshop as a reflection of the whole Tongan woman and the many gifts that she gives. And I think oftentimes as Tongan, I'm a Tongan woman, I was born and raised in Southern California. I acknowledge Tongan women being able to actually acknowledge what she's doing and acknowledging the fact that these are all different aspects and perspectives that you can take, and hopefully later on have more questions and more to talk about and learn about, because quite honestly, I learned so much from these sessions and I learned so much from you all. So please feel free, write down your questions as they come up, drop them in the chat as well. And hopefully at some point we can get back to them. And so before I formally move forward, I want to acknowledge that, you all are Zooming. I know that the University of Utah is established on the land of the Ute. And so I want to acknowledge the First Nation from which the university is built, in which the knowledge base and much of the relationships that's being built for the Pasifika program is on Ute lands, but I also acknowledge that there's many tribes that are also not recognized. So both federally and those that are not recognized by the federal government, because guess what? If we recognize you, we recognize each other, much like Kehaulani's work. I'm quoting Dr. Kehaulani Vaughn there. Our recognition of one another is in and of itself sovereignty. And so I acknowledge all of the First Nations from which you all may be hosted. And if you're not on this list, I still acknowledge wherever you may be Zooming from. And then I also acknowledge the fact that I am currently in Tongva. So I'm on the most eastern inland part of Tongva. I was born in Riverside and I was basically raised all throughout Southern California. And so I acknowledge the fact that I'm still being hosted by the Tongva and the Gabrielino, and also still occupy spaces between the Tongva, Hashman, and Orange County, where my dad is now, Orange County, Hashman, Juanino. And so between those, I would say the trifecta, the three counties, LA County, Orange County, IE, I'm all between those different areas. So I want to acknowledge all the First Nations that continue to host us. And I'll share a few words because this, again, is knowledge based from my mother. My mom is Makaleta. She recently passed away in December due to complications with COVID. And so to you that have lost family, that continue to have family that may be suffering from conditions within COVID, I just want to just uplift you all and share that I come from a very, I am still in my year of mourning, as they say. So things of, that we talk about, I learned so much from my mom, but I continue to learn so much about Ngatu in the way that we had to also lay her to rest. So there's some things that I'll share today also, but I want to uplift her again as someone that I drew so much knowledge and love and just everything. She's everything. So I just want to center those folks that have lost someone in this session. This is for all of us. And hopefully this will bring healing to you all, as I too am looking for healing throughout this year. Community guidelines. So what's said here, stayed here, what's learned here, please feel free, take it, share it. I'm going to use I statements again, respecting that I have a knowledge base that comes from my mother and from her mother. I trust that you will also be able to have these conversations, hopefully with your mothers, in being whatever that I share, please make sure you check in with your families, because I'm sure that there'll be some things that I'll share that perhaps your family doesn't necessarily hold the same types of, let's say, relationships. That's fine. I just want to be respectful in that I'm certainly sharing from Makaleta's perspective, and from what I know of this week, you all are sharing and looking at different perspectives. So hopefully this is just one that'll give you a different look at what we are working with as far as Ngatu. And I start first with a quote by Epeliha Ofa, short, I would say the short story of how I come to Pacific Islander work. I read his work later in my life. Like Kihao mentioned, I was at UCLA. I had gone all throughout undergrad. I started at community college, transferred, graduated from Cal State. I went through my whole undergrad and never once read a PI author. And so by the time I got to my master's program, and even after that, I started actually working with the Native Pacific Islander summer program, where I finally cracked open the book. And what do you know? I read Sea of Islands. And I'm not going to lie, that book, that one read was like enough to kind of take me on this like whole other pathway of like, wow, all of the things that I've learned, to circle back and say, wow, I don't know nothing. Like, I was like, I don't know anything about my own people, my own authors, my own stories. And so again, the reason why I sent her my mom is because I'd always come back and ask her all these questions. And she's like, how you gonna go to school and come back and ask me questions? You have a teacher, go ask her. So, like I have that kind of full circle moment where by the time I came back, talking with my mom, talking with, meeting folks like Kehal, like, oh my God, like there's a whole other world. And honestly, it was that type of read that actually brought me into this world of academia, where this work is actual academic work that is so deeply precious, I guess is what I would say. It's precious because I think, one, it's the world that we come from, and two, it's the world that I've been living, but no one ever fully named it, right? And so crediting Epeliha Ofa for this specific quote, but understanding that the Sea of Islands was something that changed my perspective of what it was that I was living here in Southern California. And so it brings me to introductions. I thought we'd be on Zoom enough so I could see other people on here, but that's okay. Am I able to hear who's online? No?
We can do their voices too.
If I could do that, that would be great, because I think I would just like love to hear who else is in the room. Just names and where they're zooming from.
I think Mana, can you just put their voices? I think you can.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing your voice.
Suzanne Kekoa from Layton, Utah.
Felipe Lafo from South Jordan, Utah.
Sandra Latulele from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Hello, Joy Kapapalu from unceded Ute territory, Taylorsville, Utah.
Hi, my name's LaVey Ika from Bountiful, Utah.
All right. I think that's everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mona. And thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. It's good to hear the voices, and also very good to hear your names. I'm not going to lie, it's so nice to hear that I'm listening to all the names. I'm like, I can pronounce all these names at a graduation. Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciate that, because our names are so powerful. And if anything, this is kind of how I wanted to start our workshop, in being able to center our names and think about your name, think about who named you, who you're named after. All of those are places of power if we think about talking about Ngatu, but who are we and what's our relationship to these things? And so I'm Asena, but I'm named after my dad's mom. My mom, who again, we had this conversation around who she was named after and what was going on at the time. Her name is Makaleta. She was named, her father's here on this Canva on the presentation. His name is Tevita. He was the youngest of 9 brothers, but his 2 sisters, one had kids and one didn't. And the oldest one is right here to your right. Her name is Nao. When my mom was born, he came and sat at the corner of the house and asked her while she was reading the paper to "Omai haloa kau ke whakahingoa aki e kutama," like give me a plant or give me a leaf to name her after. And while she was reading, she was actually reading, and it was a story about the Britain and specifically Princess Margaret. I think at the time had articles written about her, probably because she was rebellious. And at the time, this is what was on some of our papers. And my basically her aunt, her father's eldest sister named her Makeleta. And so you have my mom who's right here on the bottom right hand. And to the left, you have her mother, Ailine. And so I share this because as you share all your names, I hope, and if you know who you're named after, wonderful, cool. If you don't, please go and look at it, because I think I had never heard that story from my mom until we really asked her, like, who are you named after? Because I don't know where your name is Margaret, like, how is your name Margaret, all the way in Tongan. So it was good to hear again how not only what the name was, but how she was named, and again named by her dad's eldest sister. And I guess to again couch our workshop today in the significance of these kinds of ways of knowing, ways of being, I will talk a little bit about the value system, because again, these value systems, if we talk about Ngatu, it's cool, but if you don't understand how it's significant or what the relationship is, like, it's really hard to understand how we've had Ngatu for so long. And it truly is to understand the significance of how it's valued. We'll talk about how it's made, and then lastly, we'll close out with how you gift it. And again, all of this based around how my mom taught us and how she taught it me in particular. And so let me go to this one. So obviously we are in the Pacific, right? With many island nations within the Pacific. And particularly when it comes to Ngatu, again, Tapa is what it's generally known as in the Pacific. And I am going to hone in specifically about how we view it within Tonga. And within Tonga, the 4 major island groupings, we have Niue at the top, Vava'u, Ha'apai, and then we have Tonga Tapu, right? Because we live in America, I think it's often really important for us to see geography, to see where our islands are landing. Because again, depending on where you're from, there's different things that you have within these island groupings, right? So there's Ngatu that is predominantly, we can find it in all the island groupings, but there's some things like, for example, Tonga, you might find more of that in other island groupings. So when you look at the map, you kind of understand generally where these pieces can possibly be coming from, and also because of the kupesi of what's on the actual Ngatu. I would be remiss if I talk about Ngatu without acknowledging that there's still women and village families that are still making these. So I'm acknowledging the kautaha fefine that make it, the many koka'angas that make it, but the fact that they are actually made by full-on villages, and still till this day honor the value system that I'm going to talk about in just a second. Before I move on, I do want to acknowledge that this was a piece, the background of this slide is a piece that was actually shown in Australia. And so part of what I acknowledge is that we see these pieces kind of generally within our lives. If you're Pacific Islander or Tongan, like generally like, okay, Ngatu got that. But like when you consider that these things are being exhibited within some of the largest museums and galleries within different countries, it's important to know, like, if you're seeing these pieces, being displayed, part of our conversation today, I hope, will help us ask, like, okay, so we know these pieces are important, but what is on there? What is painted on these pieces? Who painted it, right? All of those things to say, these are all a part of our conversations when we think about Ngatu, right? Um, and then the significance of how these pieces play into our relationships. It's really important for us to understand generally the fact that we still have a monarchy in Tonga. The monarchy, as you can see, the royal family here, there is a relationship between us and the monarchy, and the way that we serve, and the way that these pieces are also made to serve and make sacred places when they arrive or where they are. And so here you see King Thibaut VI is here, his royal family, and then within that system you see the nobles, and then you have the speaking chiefs, or those that are considered the matapule, and then you have those who are ha'atu, are like more common people like myself, right? So there's a system, or there's a relationship, all connected, right, that serve the pieces that we have, or the things that we consider our royal gifts, or our own treasures, right? Koloa. Within our own families, right, we have our own systems as well. So there's the general society that we live in and our relationship, but within our own families, we have these relationships, right? So within our family, we also have your oldest sister, right, is considered your fahu. But all of your father's sisters are mehikitanga, right? We know this generally because we'll hear our families talk about it, but to be able to understand it as an actual value system, that way you start to understand, okay, so these are the reasons why these people are respected at these events, right? Whether it's a wedding or funeral, there's a connection, there's a relationship, right? And I listed a few different relationships, right, within a family. The same thing within church. There's specific church gatherings, right? There's blessings, there's specific significance to these church gatherings, why we would bring our koloa, our gifts, right? And then generally, when you're a part of a community and you're part of, like, let's say, a lot of this alumni, right? Your alumni from Tonga, you see it all the time. These schools from Tonga, there's a lot of like collective connections that they have to their schools. They again will bring out their most treasured gifts when it's time to have some of these like significant, like let's say it's a 50th year anniversary or whatnot, right? So there's all these different ways that you'd have to understand the Tongan value system to understand then why Ngatu would be important to a certain gathering or certain event, right? And so to that end, I am going to share, if you understand these value systems, and mind you, this is something that, again, I've come to understand by continuing to ask questions, because oftentimes, I don't know if y'all are like me, where your mom would be like, hey, after the wedding or after the thing, go fold that up, go put it in the car. Oh, no, 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 go bring it back because so-and-so is here, right? There's a lot of this going back and forth, and oftentimes you're like, you're the person folding and picking up, you're like the hired help, if you will. But the truth is, all of that plays into this system, right? It plays into who's who at these places, right? And that you and I, as women, or as sisters, or as mothers, we have a fatonia, we have a responsibility, if you will, at these events, because we, as sisters, as mothers, we have our fatonia, our responsibility to fulfill, right? And when we fulfill those things, it becomes a space that you would consider as the tauhiva. It becomes a va that now you and I have a relationship, and then we care for it, we take care of it, right? And I've noted Ka'ili for his work specifically with tauhiva, and then Tofuai Pangai and Camarelli for the work with Fatonia. And all of that to say, one can just look at these pieces and say, oh yeah, we just have these at these events. But if you don't understand who the person is and what Fatonia they're fulfilling, again, it's hard to understand how these pieces would then be significant, right? So now that we know there's a system, I want to share this video on how it's actually made. And part of the making of Ngatu, because we don't make it here in America, I've seen it where they make it in Australia, but they do not make it necessarily to the extent or as much as they do in the islands. So I'm going to share this quick video.
If there's one sound you hear in Tonga, it's the sound of tutu ngatu. Ngatu making in Tonga is the domain of the woman. Age-old traditions handed down from generation to generation. For hundreds of years, ngatu or tapa has been an iconic symbol of Pasifika.
Can you all
And
hear
in Tonga,
that? Is that
its
okay?
significance in everyday life is more prevalent than anywhere else in the Pacific. Ngatu is used in nearly every facet of life in the Kingdom of Tonga. The gift of ngatu is one of the highest signs of respect. It is used at birth to swaddle a newborn. It lines the bed of a wedding couple on their first night. And finally, wrapped around the body of a loved one in death. This is Ngatu Tonga. Sieni Mafuleo has been making ngatu since she was young. Today she's working with a kokoanga group or women's ngatu group at her cousin's village Lepaha, the original capital city of Tonga.
To make ngatu, every women in Tonga, they work as a group. This is the tutu tree that they use it for the ngatu. After this, and then we take off the skin from the tutu tree, and then they're ready to put it in the water, and then get ready for the lady to beat it. And the stick, we call it in Tonga esaike. And then the long stick down at the bottom, they call it tutua. We use the skin to making the fetaake. They have two pieces and they combine it and then start beating again.
Each woman has a certain length of fetaake they have to make before the next gathering.
So now is the time for their kokaanga to show up every individual fetaake, and they glue it and then they combine it together and they make one ngatu.
In Tonga, there are two ways of making ngatu.
On this table, they use the fabric from overseas to put it on the bottom, and then they put the fetaake or the tapa on the top of the fabric one. On the other table at the back there, they use the tapa on the bottom and then the tapa on the top. That's the traditional one.
Women from every village all over Tonga meet up weekly in their kokoanga groups, and it is an important opportunity to speak openly, where the elderly share stories with young about ngatu and other things. This process, depending on the size of the kokoanga group and the length of the ngatu, can take anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days. It is a repeated process of lining up fetaaki and combining them using a basic glue.
It's flour and water. They just combine it and then make it as a glue for the ngatu. We add kerosene in so that the bark can attack the ngatu and make it shining too.
It is during this early stage that the base colouring and drawings of the ngatu begins, wiping in paint from the koka tree and using the kupesi, etched patterns built into the ngatu tables.
Every village, they have their own kupesi and their own reason why they choose that kupesi from.
Some of the more common images drawn freehand on a Tongan ngatu are the lion, the lupe or dove, and the Tongan shield. The women also mark the length as they go according to the amount of kupesi divisions drawn on. These are known as langanga.
After the koka'anga, they roll out the ngatu and dry it under the sun.
Even while rolling out the ngatu, there is a strict protocol to follow. One woman yells out directions to keep the ngatu straight. Being so close to the end, some say rolling out the ngatu is the most important part of the entire process, making sure there are no creases or loose pieces of fetaaki that might cause a valuable piece of cloth to later fall apart. Then the woman will complete the final step of darkening the kupesi patterns or drawing them on freehand. As young Tongan women learn the ways of their mothers and theirs before them, the sound of their past and present is loud and clear.
Excuse me, mister. I'll see finish.
Ngatu is arguably one of the most respected gifts in Tongan society, but perhaps the most value comes from the making of ngatu.
This is Tongan ngatu.
I hope you all enjoyed that video. That video for sure has been one that I've used always just to kind of ground us in how these things are made. And I'm gonna go on to the next part of gifting ngatu. So again, there's the value system, right? The value system of ngatu, understanding that there's a fatongia, right? Gefua, so responsibilities to carry. And then we come to the making of ngatu, and you can see this very time consuming, it's a lot of work. And then this is what we use it for, at least what I've been taught by my mother, and I'm sure by the mother, our grandmothers. This is the way that we gift them. And so if you consider that we have our relationships to any event, any gathering, then we know that when we gift these pieces, there's a way that you gift it, right? And so I took a picture of a fuatanga. This is a good example of just a fuatanga that's, I want to say that one is a tokahonga fulu, so it's 10 langanga, right? You usually have this and you pair this with a fala, right? And so they call that koloa. That can be a gift in and of itself, right? You take a fuatanga and you put that together with the fala and you fold them together. That is one like full gift. Anything on top of that is considered more, right? It's just more, but this is a basic gift. Usually they're 10 to 12, but from what I've heard, finding a 12 piece is kind of rare. So oftentimes these pieces come in 8 langanga or 10 langanga, right? And then they have pieces up to 50 langanga, right? So very long, very like huge, right? And those ones are, again, depending on what the event is and who you are gifting to, these pieces would, it would change depending on what the event was and who it was for. But if you consider one full gift, it would be a fala and a fuatanga. And you fold those together, they consider that a fala alfi, right? I would often see my mom, she'd be pulling these pieces out, and it wasn't until I was much older and then they were like, yeah, that's one full gift, a fala and a fuatanga. It's like, who knew, right? All this time, I just always thought that these things are just separate all the time, but she's like, no, they're pairs. So it's really interesting to consider what these things are and how you're gifting them. Here's another example. This is my father who went to his auntie's funeral, right? This is his mom's sister that passed away, and the whole family came together and they went together with their gifts. So if you're looking at this picture, what you can see is that there's at least one fala, 2 falas, 3 falas. So there's 3 fala alfi. They give 3 plus that white fala, that's a kietonga, but people will add different types of things. So you have these pieces that are gifted depending on if it's a funeral, if it's a wedding, who it is, right? It doesn't matter how many, but my mom would always say, as long as you give it complete, you give them together. And it depends on what you have, right? my mom was always a believer of being true to what you have and if you don't have it, then you can possibly give money, right? This gifting type of ngatu, this is outside of our cash economy, right? So you can give money or you can give ngatu, but like the video says, and like this is something my mom would always say, the highest gift you can give is our gifts here, is our Tongan koloa, right? At any funeral, wedding, or any specific event, right? And here's an example of a wedding, right? And at a wedding, you typically will have your gifts that would go to the pastor. You also have those that would go to the fahu, so whoever is your dad's sister, right? That comes to be respected on those types of days. And then you have the gifts that a woman will give as part of her dowry, right? And so typically, again, this is from my mom. Again, check in with your mom or your aunties. My mom would always say there's always three. There's your gift of Ngatu with your wedding, there's the gift of your reception, and then there's the gift of your first Sabbath, right? So you can always see it that way, and then everything else is extra, right? These are different examples of how it is that we gift. Some people will roll it out and will bring it all the way out. Others will come and it's already folded, ready to go. And mind you, folded because the gifts are complete with a fala and a ngatu, right? And so these are just examples of things that I've had in our family that I bring to you as examples to share. But ultimately, coming back to who is the focal woman, who is the woman, who is the auntie, who is the mother of these events. And I give you like examples from what my mom has done as part of her life and what I come to then understand is my place to learn. And I'm so grateful that I've had this opportunity to ask her questions and then eventually told her, hey, can you come and share that with students in the class? Because, you know, I'm curious. I'm sure the other kids are curious, right? Usually in Tonga, if you're in Tonga, you can learn these things because you're having to do it all over and over. But here in America, I do feel like oftentimes our aunts and our moms are doing this without really explaining what it is that we're doing, you know? And so I center around the women because it is important as a woman that you understand and that we understand how it is that these things are happening. Because depending on who the focal woman is, she's always going to be the one that gives you her very best advice. And so on the top here, you see I graduated, like Kale said, I graduated from UCLA. I was very grateful to have graduated. But even at the time, to be honest with you, I didn't even realize what my mom did. She laid down a fala alfi for me to stand on. And when I was done with it, she folded it up and she gave it to my dad's sister, who happened to be here from Australia. To the right, my mom brought out her launima and put it across the whole stage for a wedding to make sure that she was respecting the relationship of that wedding, right? Here on the bottom left, you see her and her support of her husband to take pieces to respect his aunt that passed away. In the middle, you see her. This is her at one of the classes that we did. Again, talking about Ngatu, talking about how it's made, talking about how it's important. And lastly, here to the right, this is her at the wedding, the last wedding that she did, and that she was in charge of, and that she did those same things, like I told you, wala mali, wala kai, and then vala uwak sapate, right? So those are all things that, again, I share with you all as examples of what she did as now a template for us to look at, a template for us to consider. When our aunties and our moms are doing these things, this is really what they're doing. They're bringing together all of the things that they have to respect a relationship. And again, depending on who they are at that event, that's what's going to determine how they gift, right? And so I'm coming to the end of this presentation. And if you saw in that video, there was the ike, there's the tokai manioke, and the kupesi, right? The ike being this piece, the mallet that actually pounds out the tapa, right? The ngatu. And then two, the tokai manioke, or the mahoa vai, right? She talked about the piece that glues it together. And then last but not least, the kupesi, the designs that are actually painted on the ngatu. If we have time, I would love for us to at least consider just number one, if we can get together and at least give you a few minutes to think about what's challenged you, just like the Ike in the grooved edges, what's challenged or expanded your thinking, and then the smooth edges, but what has helped to bridge it. If we can just do that, number one, that would be wonderful. And then we'll come back in about 5 minutes, if that's okay, and we'll check in with everyone. If I can just leave that up for you all to look at, and then we can circle back. Let me see if you can see this. Can you see that, Mona? Okay, cool. Okay, we'll give you about 5 minutes to think about the Ike, again, grooved side and smooth side, right? The balance of the two, what's challenging you, expanding your thinking, but at the same time, what's smoothing it out, what's helping you bridge those challenges, okay? Okay, hopefully that was enough time for y'all to think about possibly the things that are challenging you or expanding the way that you're thinking. And then on the smoother side, what's helping to bridge it for you. And so if I can at least get one or two folks that may want to share out what you shared as part of your Ike. And feel free to just unmute. And I'm going to close at least with a few thoughts on knowing that, you know, as we're talking about Ngatu, or we're talking about our knowledge, and specifically as women, having this experience as being a daughter, being a sister, and how we play in this role of uplifting not only our knowledge base and what we understand, but also fulfilling our fatongia, fulfilling our role and responsibilities within our families. Thinking about the ways that they actually make Ngatu has at least helped me think more deeply about how we can have academic conversations about these things. And so I, again, bring to you all this conversation because in thinking about Ngatu, you know, my mom actually took me seriously when I told her to do a workshop on it. Usually, like, you know, some people, they won't take you seriously. They're not going to come and, you know, spend their time going to class with you. But, you know, bless my mom's heart, she would actually tell me like, oh yeah, and do you know this? Do you know that? And I'm like, I have no idea, Mom. I'm an empty vessel. Please feel free. You know, and she would just, you know, just talk about things. And to be quite honest with you, that's actually how we come to this whole workshop and how we come to think more broadly about how these pieces are made and how they're made and how they help us think about, you know, our own challenges, how piecing these pieces together can also help us think broadly about our education experience, right? And who's holding us up. And then obviously the kupesis, what are these designs and symbols all about? If we consider the things that they make on Ngatu connected to the place that they are at, right? How do we then think of ourselves and what kinds of kupesis do we offer within our education experience that then become kind of our gift, right? We gift each other these things, right? So yeah, I want y'all to continue thinking about it and reflecting and knowing that you have such a wealth of knowledge around you. I'm sure you have your aunties, your mom, your sisters. Please check in with them and talk with them, because I'm not gonna lie, it took me a while, but once my mom was on, you know, I found out that there was all these different things, and I'm like, you mean it's not just one item per person? You know, she's like, pair this, and don't you ever ask that. You know, it was a lot of like how I would say the pedagogy of doing. You have to do it. You have to sit there and do it over and over. And I finally realized, I'm like, okay, that's what she's doing. She's the oldest sister, and she's doing this as the oldest sister, respecting her little sister, for example. So all of that to say, you all have so many people around you that you can talk to. I'm just, if anything, reiterating what this program, the Pasifika Scholar Summer Institute, is doing, helping you all have more perspective, helping you all ask more questions, think deeply about these value systems that we have, and knowing that we have our Tongan value systems, but also within yourself as you're in this education experience, having a value system that speaks to you. And to that point, I listed education for liberation because your education should be liberating for you. If it is not, let's talk, because the education that you have should help you understand more about the place that you are, how these things are happening. If it's not doing that for you, please, like, let's talk more, because then it may be that this system is very it's meritocracy at that point, right? And we don't want it to just be on merit. We want it to help you understand yourself, help you understand where you are. And also, again, hopefully it's highlighting the knowledge that your family and you have been born with, right? Ngatu is made out of all of our experiences. If this workshop has done nothing for you, hopefully it's at least helping you to understand that Ngatu can be an actual thing, right? The actual Ngatu. And also it can be within the ways that we think of our experience within higher ed, all of our experiences together, right? Who's holding us together? That's also a philosophical way to start thinking about your experience in higher ed. And it's okay. And it's actually really good for you to think of it that way. So then it starts to help you as you're thinking of these things being on Ngatu, being an experience, a piece, right? Your piece, your friend's piece, your cousin's piece, you're piecing them all together. Because when you two get together, that's a powerhouse, right? And then you all are gifts in the ways that you fulfill your whakaunia as family, right? And so that's the last point I give to you all is gifting of Ngatu. So what we all do together should not only highlight what we learn, but also what we do to sustain each other so that we're not burning each other out. We're actually helping each other stay afloat, because it's for the long haul out here, right? And so I think that's the bulk of what I have here. Yeah, we are creating our Ngatu together. It's our stories, our gifts, our relationships, all of that to say we have a responsibility to one another, to your families, to your education, but knowing that, understanding ourselves as a deeper, person who understands Ngatu as not just being what you give, but also things that you are doing in education, that this is part of your individual piece that you're bringing. So I'm gonna leave it on this. I'm gonna leave you all with some Ngatu wisdom. These are things that my mom would say, and I just get a lot. I had a lot of fun with my mom. No one person creates Ngatu. It is all about a working order. It's working together, tauhifa, right? Nurturing our relationships, and it's not just in your family, but also at school, right? So you have fatonia within your family, and then you just have to switch that up to also say responsibilities at school, right? You have your fe'ofa'aki, right? You have your gifts that you give each other, but then also think about that within your broader education experience, your faculty, your peers, your staff. You gift each other at home. Gift your faculty and staff as well. Those things are not, my mom would say, that's not just for home, that's for everywhere you go, right? And then the importance of women, the importance of the women around you is that they understand. My mom would say, because they have this understanding, always lean in and check in with a woman in the family. They'll always give you the best advice for the ways that we do this gifting, right? And then what she says is, when you learn, you should share it. There's nothing like a good Ngatu piece that's left not gifted, that the moths and the rats will eat. My mom will tell you that if you keep it to yourself, it all often goes rotten. She says the same thing about knowledge. If you learn it, share it, and that way it becomes sustainable. It's in the air, so it's always gifted, right? But yeah, I leave you with the fact that, if you're a woman, you're a Tongan woman, you have a lot of power and influence in your family. And I'm telling you, as somebody that has learned from my mom, has seen her do it within her family. And I've witnessed to, folks like Kehal, folks like Moana, like I see them do it within education spaces and within the community. And so, I just challenge you all to continue to search for the ways that we know we have our own knowledges. Talking to you today about Ngatu, but again, expanding your thinking of Ngatu, not just the actual Ngatu piece, but thinking of yourself as being a part of a Ngatu, as being, you're in progress, you're in the process of, and and very soon, I look forward to the kinds of things that you will do as your gifts of being part of these spaces. But I'm going to go ahead and stop there and open it up to any questions that folks may have.
Thank you,
Thank
Asena.
you.
We're gonna move into the Q&A portion. If Mana could elevate everyone into the room. Lavi and Sifa, if you'd like to join us too, we're gonna be having Q&A with Asena. Feel free to join us.
I'll start us off. Sister, thank you for sharing your mana'o with us. So there was 2 different occasions that I want you to be able to choose what you talk about, but there was one occasion that I wanted to share, and it had to do with recognizing Fatonia on the land that we're currently on, which you had acknowledged, being in Southern California and, currently being on the unceded territories of Ahashiman, Tongva people. And I think your mom was very much about those conversations, right? How could Tongans, how can Pacific Islanders more broadly, pay their kuleana, or how do you recognize your kuleana and have that respect to fulfill your fatonia to Turtle Island and the people that are on Turtle Island. And so I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that. The other one I was hoping that if you want to talk about was how we actually brought the Ngatu into our space, our office space in higher education at Pomona College. And we had our interns who were mostly non-Pacific Islander sit on the Ngatu. And we were, I think, and you can speak more to this if you want to, but you were trying to create sacred space, right, within education. You were trying to model to them, how do you tahiwa, right? How do you nurture these spaces? How do you nurture these people? Because a lot of our students were learning in a very haole Western way, which was very much in competition with one another and not about nurturing us as a whole. So either one, sis, because those 2 experiences for me, like, really put everything into context of how not to expand beyond, the Tongan world, within the Tongan world, but also beyond, like the usefulness and the importance of it beyond.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Kale. I think I'll speak briefly to the first one because I think that one's just an ongoing thing. When I talked to my mom about Ngatu, and I, obviously, when you watch the video and you see these things are made from the actual land in Tonga or the land in the Pacific, because we recognize that Tapa, they have Kapa in Hawaii, they have Siapo in Samoa, they have, what is it? Where's Fiji? Fiji has Masi, right? So we know that these generally are everywhere, right? But what I understood and what I think we were trying to do with understanding the way that my mom understands, she goes, oh, she's like, well, these things are for the way that you acknowledge a relationship. And so I told her, like, well, I have a relationship with Kehal, like I have a relationship. And she's like, well, give her one, And I was like, really? And then my mom would be like, some Tongans, they would say, oh, maybe these things are lost on if you don't relate it to another Tongan. But I told her, I said, oh, actually, Mom, I think there's some ways that these things are actually probably more respected in other ways that, like, I don't think we realize, And so I think when it comes to the ways that she understood, if there was a relationship and if it was a relationship that was important to the ways that we understood ourselves, for example, Kehal's a faculty, she understood that. So she said, okay, you give that to Kehal, And so to me, she helped me understand myself because I'm like, I'm learning from Kehal in a way, like I'm being mentored by Kehal. Kehal is she was basically, she hired me, but like I more than just a boss. She was someone that understood the academy beyond the grades, if that makes sense. It's getting beyond all of this. I would say maybe haole way that that the university functions, and it was getting to what I would call the bones of who we are, because that's what it is. And so she helped me understand myself, and it's so funny because it would be so simple to her. She'd be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, give her that," and then I'm like, "Is it that simple?" She goes, "That's what we do." She goes, "If you go to anywhere else, these are the things that we used to respect. Those people that are meant to be, those are the right people to respect." And I'm like, "Okay, mom, so Dr. Charlie Sepulveda is a Hodgman." She was like, "Him too." She was like, so in a way, I thought she made this Tongan world very simple for me to understand. And she goes, "As long as you have it, just you can give that, baby. That's okay." And she goes, "If I don't care what people think about she goes, what I understand is what you're telling me is that that's the right person. This is their place." So she's like, so for example, she said, "You never go show up to someone's house and go shut up shop in front of their house without giving them. So this is when it happened." She goes, "So if that's Tonga, what about here?" And then she'll talk about, we talk about the history of First Nations. We would talk about those things, and she helped me understand beyond what I would say I was even offering. I'm bringing her history. She goes, "Oh, okay, then should be for them," and it's no question about it. And so I understand my mom to be someone who understands serve. How you should serve this way. And so that ended up being the way that she said, not just here in the Tonga world, everywhere you go. And so I take that as something that I continue to give in spaces where I'm like, you don't have to just be Tongan or Pacific. You can be that everywhere you go. And if it feels like there's push and, the ivory tower is real, y'all, it is. But I think like Kehal mentioned, like that becomes our relationship to create, and then we keep. And then like to the second point, Kehal, bringing students who are like not even PI to come and understand Ngatu, in the academy, it's a beautiful place, but it's also a dangerous place, y'all. Like the academic warfare is real. Like there's strong, like, because we're talking, my mom would say it goes with your knowledge is also your laumalie, because you're never without your spirit, So you'll have to have places that are sacred for you to stop. Like that's actually not like pono. It's not right. It's not morally right. So for us to be able to have a space like that and have other students who are not PI understand that, it then became a space for us to have hard conversations, have conversations that, again, would put the competition out and put the wellness of everyone, making it together, the center. Like all of that to say, it kind of turns education on its head and makes us think more about how are we all going to make it, and as opposed to what is usually the case, how is someone going to set the curve, because that's a very palangi thing. And I would I would come home and tell my mom, like, "Dude, mom, this is so funny." Like I went and took the students and they loved it, they folded it, and then she goes, "You know what, keep that and keep that over there, keep it at the school." She even told me to just keep it there. And she goes, "If it's helpful to you and your school and for kids to understand themselves deeply, keep it." She didn't even give it back to me. So she didn't take it back, is what I'm saying. I would always borrow her things, and she's like, "Just keep it, because what you're telling me, then what I would be doing with it." So I was like, Mom. But yeah, all that to say, those are at least my two brief answers to that.
I just want to point out that your answers point to, how we modify our practices, because we're not on the Aina, right? And how our ancestors did that too when they first were traveling, right? Like you have to modify, you have to innovate, but we were smart, so we did do that. But like you were saying, Asena, the whole point is the intentions around why do we have that protocol, or why do we have that practice? And are we continuing to acknowledge that in these different spaces? And your mom was so innovative, she was just, she continues to be someone that I think of as a Tongan woman, kupuna, that I look up to, because she was fearless. She was like, "No, you go do that. Who cares if other people think whatever?" She's like, "That's the right thing to do, right? You acknowledge the people of the land. You acknowledge your genealogy of mentorship, right? We have different genealogies." And I think she was just so like akamai to the point where she was just like, why wouldn't you acknowledge your genealogy and mentorship? Why don't you acknowledge the relations that are holding you in these kind of warfare spaces, right? That we create that healing. We continue to do that for ourselves. But I'll open it up, Moana. I don't know if you have a question also, or if the scholars want to go ahead, and there's a Q&A box, or you can take your mic off and put your camera on and ask a question if you all would like.
Yeah, I'll have the scholars, and if no one has one, I can ask them too. I have a question. And then we can have anybody write them in. Also, Manakale, I was just thinking about something Sandra said when she was sharing about not to delve in too deeply into the plastic part, and then also connecting with Kehao of modifying our practices and protocols. Where do you see like the gift giving, especially going into the future, folding in the conversations about sustainability and like the hyper Tonganness that is currently happening in America, where it's not just the two, it's not the fala and the ngatu, it's like you gotta have like 30 and then like 30 slippery blankets on top of that. And then
That's
you gotta
real.
have like literally, I swear they had to kill a lot of cows for all those kapapulu and cakes and
That's
drinks.
a true story. I mean, yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Juana, because I think, I think my mom was really like, again, everyone check in with your mom and your aunties, because this is something I'm pulling from my mom's box, is that she said, you can only do what you can do, and regardless of what people may say, you have to just do what you can do, because like, for example, she's like, you're gonna go running around town, going collecting everything from everybody. Everybody's gonna know you want to collect it from them, and then you're gonna come and give away 10 of these things. Like, she's like, what's the point? You just have what you have, you prepare what you prepared, and you give the very best of what you give. And so, for example, like I asked her, hey mom, what'd you do for our older sister's wedding? Because like at that time my dad was yating, like my dad was the only one that worked. And she's like, hey, I just gave what I said, it was 5 falas and that's it. That's all I'm giving. And she's like, yeah, my sister-in-law showed up trying to say, hey, you should make it 10. You should. And she said, that's what I hate. That's what I hate. When people show up and they want to give me an idea, but they didn't bring nothing. And so I love that she told me that, because I live off of that, because she goes, do you think I worry about the way the church is going to look at me? I'm worried about my daughter she went with her things complete. And if it's 1 or if it's 10, it doesn't matter, because that's my honest 5. And I loved it. And she told me that, and I'm like, thank you, mom, because she's like, yeah, because for me to get that 5, this is what I had to do. And your dad was the only one working, and I appreciate that, because that to me is like us creating that humility enough to say, hey, we know that Tonga probably is like at this point trying to keep up with the demand of these things, but these demands that we have like 20, 40, 50 to give away at every wedding. I mean, at that point, I think this is why Epeli's work is important, because he talks about that. We have these Western desires that are island, our islands, it's not sustainable. It's a very Western thing to think that you can give a gazillion pieces, but and again, I'm going off what my mom's saying. She's being sustainable, because she goes, how about me? I'm gonna give 5 and then the next one gets married out of nowhere. Like she goes, I have to be careful, because this is what it is to be a mother. You have to know that, one's gonna get married, but you still have things to take care of. You still have relationships to keep. So for me, I feel like it's humble to me to think about the conversations I have with my mom, and I'm sharing very openly and candidly with you all, because she is not someone that has a gazillion, but she did save her very best things for those types of days. And so I love it, because I can share it with you all as someone that is now in the spirit world. Like when she left, we came and looked at her things, and I'm not even gonna lie, y'all, I came in, I'm like, oh my God, how did she save all these falas? You know, I'm like, I'd never seen it. But she left and we came, and it's as if she buried herself. Like, no lie. Like, I came in, I was like, wow, mom just saved all these little things. But maybe she knew that we were crazy. We weren't there yet. She just saved all these things, people. I'm not going to lie. I think it's something for us to start creating. Like, we have to start creating a sustainable way of gifting, because at this point, it's not realistic to think that people can keep up with it, because it does cost money too. But again, I love the fact that it's outside of a cash economy. You can give money or you can give this. And so I love that we can honor the women that make these in Tonga and support them by buying these from them. So that's my thoughts on that. And I don't know, plastic Tongan, again, we're gonna have to have a whole nother conversation, because I think that has a lot to do with, like, I don't know, there's a lot, colonial history, all that.
Thank you, Asena. I think we're gonna, if anybody has a question real quick, no? We'll close out with the last minute or so. Thank you, Asena, so much for your time and for sharing your poto and ilo with us today. I always learn something new. I think I've heard this a few times, but like every single time I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna write I have like an idea, or that's what like a character in one of my pieces, I need to have them say, like, that's their voice in my head. So thank you, sister, for joining us and for accepting the invitation, even though you have a million things to do and all the kids and the directing you have to do for yourself. So we love you, and we're so grateful that your mom passed this knowledge on to you. For the scholars that are listening, I hope that maybe you all will go back to one of your own kupuna, your elders, whether that be blood relation or not, and ask them a little bit about the stuff that you sometimes take for granted. I just text Lavin, was like, oh, we need to go back to Grandma Anna and ask her like 10 million questions about what you're saying. So about Ngatu and the gifting and how she does it. So Sena ofalahiatu to you and your family. Thank you for joining us. Cal, do you have anything?
Thanks, sister, as always. Love you a bunch. I'm just so grateful that you decided that you could do this session with us. I know that you turned down all these other sessions, but I think mom would be happy and proud. She did this last year, and to continue in her legacy. We're trying, mom, we're trying. We're going to continue for you. So thank you, sister.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Kehal. I am going to just, leave it on a high note, because I'm not going to cry out here. But again, just thank you, everybody, for sharing your ike and sharing your time. If anything, what I will say is that I think mom really believed that our kids would care. So I really believe in my heart of hearts that these things are that these knowledge bases are still important, and that like Mona said, like, we create the ways that these things happen. So I just think it's up to us. Once we start shifting these dynamics, I think things can shift, but I do think it's a generational thing. I think first generation is still really caught up in, like, let's give 50 million to show our love. But love can also be sustainable and reasonable, so that our families are not loaning to do these things, because of course people do what they have to do. Again, I'm always going to defer to the woman in your family, but I think that there's an important work to be done as far as becoming sustainable about where we go from here, because we want it to be sustainable. We want these things to continue. So ofalahiatu, I'm not going to take any more of your time. Just continued success for your week. And for me and for mom, just ofalahiatu, and we hope that we can continue just to stay in touch with the Pasifika Summer Institute every summer. So ofatu.
Thank you, Asena. All the scholars stay on. Thank you.